Hello, greetings, humans. This is a very, we'll call it serendipitous potential meeting of myself and Clark. I'm always talking about how I want to have conversations with people, and it's hard to find people willing. And Clark, he volunteered and he was enthusiastic. And so we're going to have a conversation. There's kind of a central theme we'll get to in a bit. But first, I figured we would let Clark talk about himself for a little bit. I particularly want to ask about his book, but I'll let him kind of introduce himself.
Yeah, but I'm Clark Jackson. But yeah, going off, I guess what I think might be the theme of this conversation. I wrote a book. I wrote a memoir, and it's about my experience with nihilism. I grew up Christian. My parents were and are very Christian, and I quickly just it didn't work. It wasn't working for me. At a young age, I dealt with I think molested is probably the most appropriate word, and that experience combined with like Christianity, Catholic guilt type stuff, even though I wasn't Catholic, um, just put me on the path of kind of stereotypical self destruction, drugs, shenanigans, stuff like that. Got to a place where I just thought like life was pointless. Um, was pretty much acting like it. Been to jail. I just sold weed and just got drunk all the time. And that was all the way up until I was like 26 years old and maybe almost 27. So I kind of let the prolonged adolescence thing go all the way up until close to 30 years old of just fucking around basically. But I really was just like, I saw life as pointless. I saw like good, bad, morality. It was all bullshit. And the only reason why I didn't engage in like more potent sin, crime, or whatever was just because I lacked the courage to really get too crazy, I guess. Um, but I was at a party and my friend thought he died. We thought my friend died. Just took some acid and went kayaking. We couldn't find him. It got dark, so I worried that he drowned. And eventually, we found him. And that was kind of like a wake up call. And then it got me just trying to going down the path, philosophy, getting back into theology, just trying to figure out the meaning of life, blah blah blah. And then so I started behaving in a more like socially acceptable manner, but I couldn't figure anything else out. And then I basically had a religious experience, which kind of set me on the right path, I would say. And that's where I'm at now. And I'm currently driving across America. I've been doing a lot of biking too, but less recently. And I'm climbing the tallest mountain in every single state. And maybe I'll write a book about that as well. And right now I'm in Alaska, literally taking off for Denali tomorrow. And then how we got connected is I saw your video um, talking about the cringe of um, biblical masculinity, and I thought you were going to be coming at it from. I watched it just kind of like, oh, what's the shit? And I thought you'd be coming at that from just like a leftist perspective, and you weren't, and then you were actually talking about things that I've been thinking and feeling recently, just being like, I really don't like the left. I feel some sort of uh connection or alignment with like normie Christians, but I think like the very conservative Christians go too far. And I agree. At this point, I'm more aligned to the with the trajectory of the very conservative Christians, but like I don't want to end up where I think they want to end up. And so yeah, I was just checking out what you were saying, and I thought it was a better video than I was expecting. And I was kind of just teasing when you were like, "Oh," when I was like, "Oh, don't say you're an anarchist," and um, and uh, and it seemed like you do identify as an anarchist. So I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. There's a lot I want to try to remember to hit on. It's interesting
It's okay. We'll figure it out.
the parallels in that, like, the time frame, I would say, up until I was about 26, I was pretty much a big douchebag. And I had, I guess, you had a religious experience. I guess I call mine more of it's a combination of two things: a divine sort of experience induced via psilocybin, pretty classic, pretty cliche. But that was like the starting point. Um, what really continued that journey was actually adopting a dog and then building this just deep, intimate relationship with this creature as I was trying to crawl out of this just darkness of being a douchebag and facing myself, and then having this animal that unconditionally loved me, and just he was like the best thing. And so that the psilocybin kind of started the journey, but then this dog that I had, he was like my guide in a lot of ways. Like, I got a real life spirit guide for a little bit, and he was really really cool. So I wanted to touch on that the parallels. My journey started about 26, and I don't really feel like I started hitting a stride of finding any footing whatsoever until like my early 30s. And so I was going to ask, how old are you now?
I just turned 34 on June 5th. So yeah, like I'm a fully grown adult. I'm 34, and it's just like, and I agree with what you just said. It's just like only relatively recently where I feel that I'm kind of on like firm ground, even though I'm actually, I guess in terms of like spiritually, my psyche or whatever, um, but actually in terms of like my real life, like I've also, I mean, I guess it's a little bit synchronistic or ironic. Like I've just been living in an RV as well since January. So it's like so it's like in a way my life isn't, my practical life is very much not on solid ground, but I would say my outlook is much more on solid ground. I'm very much not a nihilist anymore, even though I would never identify. I never identified that way, but that's what I was.
It was like, well, I don't even think we even said the title of your book, so I'll read it real quick. So it's Eat Some Ice Cream, Bang a Hooker, and Kill Myself, a memoir about nihilism and the meaning of life. And that just like a lot of that could be my 20s right there. And then I'm sure you had mentioned you used the word molested, and I wasn't sure if it was literal in that way or if it was more of like your brain was molested. But either way, there's trauma, especially with the
No,
church.
no, no.
And
Sexually molested by like older, like an older boy of like a family friend, like sexually molested as like a kid. Which like it wasn't like in terms of what happened, like it wasn't like I wasn't it wasn't that extreme, but the effects of it being like young and sensitive, like I was like probably 7 or 8, and then also just like around that time, kind of being able to um, wrap my head around just like the things I was being taught at church, whatever, just like sin and guilt. Like I even before, I think it was before that, at a young age, like I was aware when I became aware of like the concept of just like death and heaven and hell, that, and even the concept of just like eternity in the afterlife, like actually really scared me when I was at a very young age. So I was like kind of, I was dealing with those things at a very young age. And then when that happened, yeah, being like sexually molested, it made me like, I just felt very shameful and guilty. And like my family, we would have like prayer time, like, and like just have like a family quick like prayer, like, oh, you pray, we up and praise for those things. And I would just like every single like little Bible prayer session we'd have, and I would just be basically like begging for forgiveness. As when I'm probably like, I don't know, 8 or 9, just being like, dear God, please forgive me for my sins. Like I had this, you know, this awareness of just that, like I've done something very terrible, and I was very ashamed of it at just a very young age. And I remember when I was like older in middle school being at like a Christian summer camp, which I actually really liked the camp. And but you know, it was very uh it was, I guess, pretty potent in its agenda, Christian agenda, of like towards the at the end of the camp, they had the boys and girls separate, and we were instructed to write to our future wives. This was like when I'm about 14, like a letter saying that we like saved ourselves our virginity until marriage. And I just so I'm like, yeah, 13, 14, and I just wasn't, I wanted to write the letter, but I was so ashamed of like still what had happened when I was younger that I didn't feel like I could like write the letter, and I made like a conscious decision to be like, oh, I'm just gonna do all these other sins to like dilute the sin that had happened. And so I did that as a conscious decision, and I kind of like forgot about that until I was about 18. So it was just like it just ended up just setting me on like a really bad path at a young age before I was really able to like assess, communicate, properly deal with these things. So I forget what your question was.
You, it was, if you were using that word sort of literally or figuratively, and it was both essentially.
Oh yeah, I was
And
being literal.
yeah, quite literal. And um, you also, and I don't think you did it on purpose. And I'm not saying this critically, but you kind of minimized a little bit the experience. And I wonder if that's just because as men, we have so much that we have to endure that we pack the word compartmentalize. We just compartmentalize so much of it away. And then there are not a lot of great resources for men, and I speak from my own experience. I had again, a lot of parallels to your story, and that trying to you use the term dilute the sin, and that just like I was like, oh my gosh, I never consciously thought that, but that's it, but that's what in some ways I was trying to do. And so I wonder though.
Well, I would.
Oh, I'm sorry, go on.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to say that, like, yes, that was definitely an issue for a long time that inhibited me from like properly dealing with it and healing from it. Was that I did minimize it a lot because I would always compare it to um, other people who had dealt with things that are much worse. So I could always be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Get over it, like to myself. And one of the things that finally allowed me to really deal with it was once I started um, getting out of the nihilism, was I read Viktor Frankl's book Man's Search for Meaning, and I'm sure you've probably at least heard of it, right?
Oh, I've read it. I've read it. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah,
It'll make you laugh and cry
I
on the same
assumed
page.
I assumed that you had, and you have, and yeah, and when he talks about I think it's pretty early in the book. I haven't read it in a while, but when he talks about despair is like a gas, is how human despair it's like a gas that will fill up the chamber that it's in. So it's all relative. Whereas it's like if like he lived through the Holocaust, so he had a bad time. Whereas if someone else has maybe a much more sheltered experience, but let's say they don't have a lot going on and they just have a dog and that dog dies, like that could truly be earth shattering for them. And so to hear that from him allowed me to be like, you want to what? Like, I just need to not compare my own bullshit to anyone else's and just accept it. Like, you want to what? Other people have gone through a lot worse. Other people haven't had to deal with this stuff, but it did really affect me. And to be able to like not minimize it and just like accept it and that it did fuck me up um was really helpful. So I definitely did that for a long time. Like when I got older, I was just like, okay, this happened and it wasn't good. And then I still had to deal with that, minimizing it for like a long time before I could be like, all right, deal with it, kind of like face on. So I just wanted to say, like, yes, you're right, and I think I still do. Like, it's still kind of difficult. I don't know. Like, I don't like saying the word molest. Like, I don't like saying it. Maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's because I was molested. I don't know, or maybe it's just it's just awkward, it's uncomfortable, and it's always going to be to a certain extent to talk about it,
It,
you know?
it, it- well, and I think that to an extent should be normal because there's this talking point that, we should bring back shame. Um, we
Which I agree with to a certain extent.
Yeah, because that's a very traumatic thing, and a large, I think, a larger percentage than studies would show of young boys and girls are being traumatized. I think that's actually kind of part of human history to an extent. And before I get on a diatribe, I wanted to ask, what was your religious experience that kind of reoriented your trajectory?
Is that I mean, it's really pretty interesting. Before that, I mean, this was only a few years ago when I had a religious experience. And I say religious experience specifically because there's a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience, I think is the name of it. Do you know about this book?
No, no.
It's by it's by William James,
Okay.
who I think is like considered like the father of psychology in America. Do you know who have you heard of William James?
No, I don't want to grab my phone and write a note, but you'll have to remind me after
Yeah,
this,
so
or I'll watch this.
it doesn't really. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter for the conversation. So he wrote this book. So I mean, I don't know much about him, but apparently he was. I mean, he was educated at Harvard, probably like right around the turn of the century, from like the 1800s to the 1900s, like around there. You know, look at and if anyone listens to this, or for yourself, you can look it up. But he wrote a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience. It was published almost like 100 years ago. I had the book. I never read it, but I had it. And on the book, there's a on the cover of this one edition by like Penguin House or whatever. There's this like it it looks like a vortex, like a circular vortex looking out from a dark sky into like a clear sky or something. Um, and all that to say is like I just had an experience that like I basically saw something very similar in the sky. And when I say saw, like I saw it in like my mind's eye, I suppose, is the best way to put it. It's actually, the whole thing's very difficult to put into words. But I experienced basically this vortex, if you will, that was very similar to the cover of this book that was published over 100 years ago called The Varieties of Religious Experience. And then after the experience I had, I was like, this reminds me of this freaking book that I have that I've never read. And I went and started reading some of the anecdotes that are detailed in the book. And it was like, it was like so heavy because of the similarities that it was like difficult for me to read because I was like, damn, like it's just so weighty. Um, so that's why I say religious experience because it was like it just tied to this, you know, this old, long dead, intelligent writer who was writing about that stuff like a long time ago. And I was just like on a hunting trip with some friends and like walking down the hall in a cabin, and it was like all of a sudden I entered like a more real reality, and it was like it's kind of like the answers of the universe were being like downloaded into me, and then it was like getting to the point where it was like similar to a psychedelic experience where it was just like becoming overwhelming, and I like started being like, all right, stop, like I can't handle this. And it kind of felt like afterwards I was being like chastised by God. Like I write about this in my book, and it was just like you because up until then I thought like I'd really been kind of like no, I'd truly been like searching for the meaning of life and all that stuff. Excuse me. I've been trying to figure out like what's the point of life and all that, and really kind of and it consumed a lot of mental energy over the years, and it felt like I was like being given the answers, but it was like too much. And then once I was like, okay, I've had enough, it kind of subsided, and then it seemed as if God or whatever just like heard this voice, just been like, yeah, like you can't. There's stuff that's like above your pay grade, like you can't handle it. Don't worry about it. Just focus on your life, what you need to do and what you need to say, and let me worry about all this other stuff up here. Toodaloo. And then I just like came back to reality, and that was it. I bet. And the thing is, it wasn't like it was definitely different from a psychedelic experience, but in terms of its intensity, it was on par with like the the hardest I've ever tripped. So it was pretty wild, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. And I was pretty much sober. Like I'd had maybe like two drinks and like a few hits of off a joint, but I would have driven without without an issue. Maybe that's not a great thing to say, but like I didn't feel very intoxicated. And all of us, I was just walking down the hall to take a shower, and all of a sudden it was like this just happened out of nowhere. And and ever since then, like I before then, like I been doing all this philosophizing and trying to make sense of everything, and I realized I was definitely like using my inability to rationalize everything as an excuse to like not take life as seriously. And then ever since then it's like my searching has just been done, and this was a few years ago, and ever since then it's just like I don't I really don't spend any more time or energy being like, oh, what's going on, and like and trying to over philosophize or demanding understanding everything. And it was a very interesting experience. It was definitely one of the most potent experiences I've ever had in my life. Like it was up there with smoking DMT, and I was just again quite sober and just walking down the hall. So it was pretty wild.
So you do have you've smoked DMT, and you mentioned like maybe acid or LSD. So you definitely have
Uh,
psychedelic experience.
yeah, I've done a lot of psychedelics a lot of
Okay, and
times.
so you have that sort of baseline to compare it to, and so it's really cool that it happened sober, because I
Yeah,
love
I mean,
psychedelics. But I don't think they're the only, I guess, way to obtain this sort of download of information. Use that term. Um, have you
that's
had?
yes. It
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like actually I don't need to say anything right now. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask if you have experienced downloads before. Is that something? I guess for me personally, it's I get downloads all the time, and it's so frustrating because people are always like, "How do you know what you know, Andrew?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I can't just like say, oh, it was downloaded from the universe,' because people will think you're freaking crazy." But I'm sure you
Yeah,
might have that intuitive.
I only shared my experience initially with like a few people that I knew that I could speak with honestly, and that were a religious, spiritual enough to not think I'm crazy. But I also don't really like for the most, a lot of people that I'm close with that it's I can talk to, but I only told like a few people like right off the bat, just being like, "Yo, I had this crazy experience," because and because I think I have experienced similar sensations. I've had similar experiences with psychedelics, but actually this was in terms of using the phrase things like information being downloaded into me. I have experienced that before, but never to this degree. Like it literally was as if like my head was being pulled open, and it was just like the universe information just being dumped into my brain to the point where I was like, I can't handle this. Like it was like I could understand like I could understand like the weight of the implications of like Jesus Christ and his sacrifice. And it was like, okay, I can't. Like I literally can't. And then yeah, as soon as I said I can't, it seemed as if like God was being like, yeah, no shit, you can't. Duh, dummy. Like, what are you even doing? Even trying to? Oh, I want to know all the answers of the universe, you silly goose. And I was like, yeah, of course, you're right. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm such a goofball. Like, I'll stop thinking about that stuff.
I'm not laughing at
And
you.
I
You're just funny.
no,
So like, okay.
it's ridiculous. It's preposterous, but like I don't. But also, as I said, I had this book, and so that I purchased it out of curiosity because I'll go through book buying binges, and then so I had the book, never read it, or I tried to read it at one point, but it's actually not a very good read. It's pretty. I started at the beginning, whatever. So after this experience, I was like, this reminds me of that book. I go and find the book, see the cover, and I'm like, yep, experienced that precisely, pretty much, which is on the cover of the book. Started reading the book, and it literally was like, I have to put this book down because it was like I was reading about my experience in these anecdotes that are detailed in the book. The author himself didn't necessarily, or I didn't read that the author himself had experienced these things, but he had detailed people who had. And again, this was published over like 100 years ago. And I was reading, I was like, wow. And and it was just like, okay. And it was just like, yeah, stop trying to understand the universe. Like just try and do what, it's difficult enough as it is just to make enough money to, you know, stay level. So it was like just focus on your own life. That's it. That's all you need to do.
And you had said,
And I've been able to be like at peace with that since.
uh, you had mentioned, come on, internet, stay with us. Um, that understood the weight of the implications of what Jesus had done. So, you believe he existed or someone named Jesus existed. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. Without being too Jordan Peterson about it, what does it mean to believe? I'm sure you're aware of that conversation.
Yeah, that was funny. You're funny.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But also, do you know, are you, if you don't know about this YouTube channel, I'm about to put you on. Do you know about the YouTube channel Galahad Eridanus?
Nope, never heard of it.
Bro, I'm gonna send you the best ish after this.
Is it
I
parody
I
or
believe, yeah, I no,
no? Okay.
it's I don't even know how to describe it. I'll just send you a video, and I'll love to hear your thoughts. But like, I I think I think see, this is stuff where it's just like my where I'm at with the whole thing about like Jesus is okay. Let's say I'm an atheist. You're a Christian. So what? Like, what are just like what I just said earlier about my religious experience? All that I need to focus on is what am I going to do? What am I going to say? Like, what did Jesus say about uh, judging something by its fruit? Who cares what someone says they believe in? What are you going to do about it? What are you doing? That's what matters. All we can control is our actions. We can just control ourselves. So it's just like, okay, if I said like, oh, I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus. Okay, cool. Like even Jesus said that there's people who said, Lord, Lord, didn't I do all this, cast out demons in your name? And he's like, I never knew you. So I think what I say about those things like kind of don't matter. Like I think most Christians are just trying to they just want people to see if they're in the same if they're in the in group or in the out group, which does those things do matter. But yeah,
No, I'm tracking, and I more or less,
you know what I mean?
yeah, I more or less feel the same way. But we can, you had mentioned, or I had mentioned, I guess, the religious right and the fanatical left. That's kind of what brought us together. And you don't like I just say it like this: commies on the left and fascists on the right. um
But
it
even fascist, I don't what I don't even I'm not even I think people just use that as like authoritarian. I don't even really know what a fascist is. My what I think a fascist is like someone who thinks that corporations and the government are in cahoots. Isn't that what it means technically?
Very much yes. And
And isn't
so
that what we already have?
yeah, yes. To me personally, the fascism, communism, authoritarianism, they're all in the same category. There's really very little true differentiation um, when it comes to how things are actually um, executed or enacted. Um, and
No pun
so
intended with executed.
I well played, you caught that. Um, well, and that's where these culture wars that are clearly happening, the left right, the divide and conquer strategy, it's so dang successful. And so you and I think maybe share that very similar, we don't want to be part of the extremes of the left or the right. But it almost feels like we're being pushed to ally with the right because in my opinion the communists, whatever, the globalists, I use that word. People think that's anti-Semitic. I think that's lame, but I'll still use that word. Um,
Bro,
Christians,
I will not tolerate any perceived anti-Semitism.
I don't know if you're being serious or not right now.
No, I'm not.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
being serious.
Okay. Yeah, no. And so how do we move forward combating the globalists and what does society look like after we've won? Because you had criticized me in jest, it sounds like, because I like anarchism. So what do you think the solution is?
Well, so yeah, I mean, the way I interact online is usually very just me just saying stuff really quickly just to get some sort of response, usually like trolling. I'm just fooling around for the most part, or just liking and going rock on to the people I agree with explicitly. People I explicitly agree with, just support for whatever. Um, I assume you know who Michael Malice is.
I love Michael. He's hilarious.
Yeah, see, I don't. Did my thing with it's about identification, and I think that there's something lost, or I think anarchism is never going to happen. It's like, did you see Trump at the Libertarian convention?
I saw clips. I just saw the 3% clip where he roasted them, and I was
Exactly.
like, "That's
It's
funny."
he because he's like, you guys should endorse Trump, and they're kind of like booing, and he's like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, enjoy your 3%. Like, to see, for me, like Dave Smith. Do you know who Dave Smith is? The libertarian guy.
He's friends with Joe Rogan. Like I know who he is. I don't follow
He's
him, but I
really smart.
okay.
He's very knowledgeable. You know who he is.
Yes, yes,
You know who he is, right? Like, yeah, he's friends with Joe.
yeah.
Yeah, he's very smart. He's very knowledgeable, but he's a libertarian. But it's just like, okay, you're choosing to identify with this group. That's never going to win. Like, and so I mean, yeah, I was not trying to be condescending when I answered. I was like, be a pragmatist, which I would say I am a pragmatist, but I don't identify as that, because then I feel like when you're identifying to something, you're kind of like you're holding, like, oh, I'm holding on to this. Whereas we're kind of in this state where it's just like, yo, you just need to survive. Like, you just need to make it to the next level. Um, and whereas like anarchism, it's I put like anarchism, and I'm blocked by Michael Malice on Twitter. I don't even remember why, but it's probably because I was roasting him for being an anarchist. Because for me, it's just as unattainable. Like being like, oh, I'm an anarchist. I promote anarchy. I hope anarchy wins next election, is just as unlikely as saying like, I think we should. Oh, Elon wants to put people on Mars. I think we should put people on Pluto. Like, it's not going to happen. The federal government is not going away in our lifetime, nor do we actually, like, if you really think about like what would happen in our lifetime for the federal government to dissolve, it would be complete chaos. Complete chaos. Like, it would be worse than things are now. And that's why what I think is that people should just focus on like very specifically of just like things that are like attainable and measurable. Like I'm going to put my efforts towards acquiring half of a cow and putting it in a freezer. I'm going to focus on maybe buying a gun. I don't have a gun. Maybe I should buy one to protect my family if things really pop off. Um, maybe I should do this, communicate with someone and just and really just only and it's kind of like drop labels and just try and focus on like these are the people I'm with. This is like these are the steps that I'm making. Um, so I mean, yeah, I was kind of just being like tongue in cheek. Like you identify however you want, obviously, but I think like if anarchism means like the federal government doesn't exist, it's like it's not going to happen. Like the federal government's not going away. It is a behemoth. It's quite possibly the most powerful entity that's ever existed in human history. You know what I mean? Like the United States federal government. Like we're talking about like the post office all the way to the NSA. Is that
So,
is that true? You know what I mean? Is that's all the federal government, right?
well, but
So
I see where you're going in terms of like total employees. Um, but my brain
you
goes to
understand my I
like,
think you understand my point.
no, yes, and no. I understand your point, and but I don't agree with it. I'm curious
Okay.
as to why you think it would be chaos if the federal government dissolved. What do you think, like, would the chaos look like?
How was it because it's such a powerful beast? Like if you have to think about the like yes, it could. Like if it was like I think a society could exist without the federal government, but I'm talking about if we just deal with the way things are now, um, like for the CIA, the NSA, the Democrat and Republican Party, and their interconnections in the government, for those to just basically kill themselves. And I mean figuratively, like the agency, the government entities, not individuals. Like how like, why would they do that? Like for that to happen, it would like people are going to have to make it. Like it would require like a revolution, and I don't want a revolution like that. I'm not someone who's like on the right that like wants a civil war. I don't want a civil war. I've never been in a war, but I've read enough and watched enough movies about war to know that war sucks. And like I mean, I just read most of Grant's biography, fucking 900-page book, and like the Civil War seems just horrendous. So to be able to get it, like if you think about it, it's like, oh, the mafia. It would be better if the mafia didn't exist, but if the mafia at the height of its strength, like to get it to not exist, would require a lot of bloodshed or a lot of shit to happen. And I'm just saying, like, it's not gonna like for it to happen. It's like we need to level this mountain. Like it's going to require a lot of dynamite.
You're right in a lot of what you said there. Um, but
Yeah, and I'm also not an anarchist.
yeah,
Like
but you don't have a label, right? Because you don't want a
why
label.
I it's I mean I'm definitely not a Republican. Fucking not a Republican. I hate Republicans. I couldn't imagine identifying as a Republican. I mean I can't. I mean I think I'm identifying as Democrats worse, but a Republican's not much better. I understand why people are gonna be like, I'm gonna but then there's a difference. We're kind of talking about two different things, like the choice to identify as something, and then the how effective that movement could be potentially. And I just don't see um, if anarchy means that there's no federal government. I just don't see that as a tangible movement. I mean, do you? because there's gonna have to because there's always gonna be a top dog, and then that top entity is going to have to is obviously going to have a it's going to have an agenda, and whoever's in charge it will effectively be the federal government. Well, or it'll be someone else, or be it's like there's a top dog, like there just is. One of the things that I agree with is like, and I don't know how to go about it, but is like the trust busting, like you know um breaking up monopolies. Like I understand that, and I agree with it to a certain extent, but I can't say that I have like an agenda for any trusts being busted. I can't even point to one and say like, oh, this is how it should be done. You know what I mean? But I understand that in theory, and that would require an entity to be able to bust up trusts. You know what I mean?
So,
Because if you had no federal government, like a company could just arise and be like, I'm the richest, I'm in charge. You guys have to do this, or I'm gonna fucking shoot you. You don't like it, you're fired. What are you gonna complain to? No, you're gonna do nothing. Basically how like America has operated around the globe for decades.
well, and so
The fa-
do you believe it's actually America, or
well,
who do you think is
factions
kind
of them.
of who's above America, right? Because Joe Biden's not running things. There's people above him.
Well, I think about it like I have no idea. Uh, I don't understand why. I do not understand America's alliance with Israel. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand. We say, oh, it's a democracy, therefore, I don't. I don't know. Like, I think that when people talk about uh, the shadow government or whatever you want to call it, is that there's like an assumption that that it's uniform, but I don't think that it, as much as it actually does exist, is uniform. Like if you think about like uh you know the Bulls when they had Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, and Dennis Rodman. Like Dennis Rodman was a key part of the team. He wasn't Michael Jordan, but he was wild enough where he followed different rules than the other people. He was allowed to go out and fucking wild out in Vegas a night before a game because he could and he wanted to, and he had that sway, and he would still perform apparently after partying in Vegas. And to compare that to the people behind the scenes, like I just don't think they're all on the same page. Like who is it exactly? Obviously people point to like the bankers, um oil companies, Israel. I don't know. But it goes back to, it's like, what can I do about it? Like if I had hard evidence of Hillary Clinton eating human babies, like what would I do differently? I would still have to conduct myself. I would still have to handle my business, my job, my personal relationships. Even if I had hard evidence of like peak conspiracy being true or something.
Whoa, oh no, we lost Clark. Let's see if he comes back. That was such a bad place to lose. Hillary Clinton eating babies. Whatever you do, do not Google frazzle drip. Frazzle drip. Do not Google it. I'm going to just keep talking for a minute or two, see if he pops back on. It was probably my connection. I don't know. What time is it? Oh wow. 10:30. How long have we been going? I don't know. Does it give me a timer? Do 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 do. Dang it. We were on a roll. Oh, I can pause the recording. Let's try that.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. I think
I
I
forgot. I forgot how quickly my phone was going to die on a Zoom.
no, I'm glad you were able to come back because one of the last things you were talking about was Hillary Clinton eating babies, and I was like, "Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious." Um,
Right. Like that's go. It's funny because it goes back to it's just like this. It's just like the religious experience I had. It was like stop thinking about all this shit. So which I just end up in a cliche. It's like just focus on things you can control. So it's just like it's irrelevant to who controls the you know, who's really pulling the levers behind the scenes. It's like, it could be an evil Jewish conspiracy. So what? Like it's out of my control. Because that's what it really gets down to. What are you going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? And for most of these issues, there's nothing I'm going to do about it, which might sound discouraging, but for me, I've had to hold on to a certain type of belief where it's just like, you know, I got to a place where I thought like life was really pointless and I was acting like it. And now that I have to believe that my life is meaningful, even though I can't fully articulate why, I
um,
just, because it's like,
that's very fair. Like that whole focus on yourself thing. That's the first step, literally, to any like meaningful sort of purpose or life. Um, but then it makes me wonder. Then, okay, so you're not a Republican, not a Democrat. I totally get it, but you still need to try to do something. So, are you going to vote for Donald Trump? Is that like the less of two evils, or are you just not voting at all?
uh, recently I've been leaning towards not voting at all, but I might just vote for Trump. I did once. I voted for Trump once. Uh, I don't think I don't know about Trump. He's more. I prefer listening to him than fucking Joe Biden. Obviously, like people who vote for Democrats are just women and people and dudes with fucked up hormones. Like Trump's fucking funny. Like he is like no matter what, he's funny. He's obviously more articulate than Joe Biden. He's sentient. Joe Biden is not. But I mean, he might just be I don't know controlled opposition. I have no idea. But so it's either not voting or I might go down to the voting thing wearing a bunch of Trump shit just to be a just to have fun. Just
And
to go vote for Donald Trump in Massachusetts. Be like, fuck yeah, I'm voting for Trump. Oh, who you voting for? You fucking pussy. You know,
and it sucks because
it does suck. But also another thing I would say is like the more you read, the more you read about history, you realize that peaceful exchanges of power and living in a stable society is rare. It's rare. And so to be all have your whole earth shattered because it's like, oh my god, like I can't afford my own house. It's like, yeah, most fucking people that have ever existed have not been able to afford their own fucking house. Like our generation compares ourselves to the wealthiest, most well-off people that have ever existed and said, oh, we don't have that. Oh, my life sucks. Like buckle up. Like life gets fucking rough. Like a lot of people had to fight or die or be enslaved or put everything that they could carry on their back and fucking move to avoid those things I just mentioned just to survive. Why should I not have to do that? I hope I don't, but that's what a lot of people have had to do, you know?
But you kind of
So,
went, you kind of used the opposite extreme when criticizing people who use one extreme. I mean, I agree people need to bitch less, but I think that's part of how they. Are you familiar with Noam Chomsky and his book Manufacturing Consent?
mhm.
Okay, Noam Chomsky is a fucking piece of shit, but the
But the book makes a strong point. I
it
mean,
does.
people should be aware of it.
It does. No, you're correct. And I think materialism is one of the strings that I call them the social engineers pull to manipulate people. And so we do have we almost like idolize or like create gods of these celebrities and these athletes, and we have this hyper, like, I what do I call it, hyper luxurious class of people that is such a fraction of the population. I can see how resentment builds when, like, there's a bunch of young men who can't even afford a few acres and to date. Now I'm kind of getting into like the whole dating thing. Like, I don't know about you. I like ladies, but the dating market is it's wild right now. I don't know how we got there. We start.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely. No,
Yeah. I'm probably
no,
gonna.
because
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, no. I mean, it is my. I mean, I'm in a serious relationship. I have a girlfriend. We've been together for like 2 years. I'm gonna propose to her, and it's completely changed my whole outlook. And the reason why I'm being able to do that is because my whole outlook has changed very much, and it requires um the way I interact with um not only my whole life, but also more directly with like my immediate family and like my parents. Like my parents are retired, and I'm like, you guys should be be like, I want to have some kids. You guys should be facilitating, like, you guys should give a shit and be willing to facilitate whatever I need to make that happen. And also vice versa. I should be willing to um, help take care of my parents. I I think the way forward is people need to. It also depends on where you're at, but like the way forward, I think is going to be people groups, families, small communities that fucking are paying attention and are willing to work together and 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 like I was saying earlier, focus on tangible things. Like one of the things, like my dad, who'd be like, like, oh, I think the election was not um was there's fraudulent aspects of the election. I'm like, yeah, me too. What are you going to fucking do about it? Like, oh, we need to make sure the elections are secured. I'm like, all right, go secure the election. Or why don't you maybe do focus on some things that you can actually make a difference on? It's like buy some food. You don't even have a gun. You're talking about the election, go buy a fucking gun. You might have to shoot a deer with it. If you need a gun, it's really helpful if you have one. If you don't need one and you have it, no big deal. And I think that's how people are going to move forward. Like you need to like this. I think individualism has more than run its course. Like we don't exist as individuals, and the whole point of being an individual, the whole point of being a fucking man, like all these society, like we're a society that doesn't have a male, a ritual into manhood, whereas most societies did. Societies that are never connected figured out that we should have that they ritualize the process of becoming a man, and it's not to like, oh, go be an individual, go live by yourself and fucking get a fucking leased BMW. It's no, you become an individual, a fucking man, so as you would be useful to the tribe. Like people need to figure out who their people are and just and grow. Like my shit is like I'm not after this. It's like I'm not ashamed. It's like I'm taking my freaking girlfriend, like we're going to my parents' house because I'm not because houses cost $1 million in Southern California, and I'm not gonna have both of us work some fucking gay jobs for fucking some stupid company that doesn't give a shit about me just so I can fucking afford it. Like there's that my parents have a house, they have fucking room, that's where we're going. Get pregnant, you know?
That
Like
was
that
awesome.
is how I see it. So because people like we have all these stupid ideas of like, oh, I'm gonna go to Europe, I'm gonna go on a fucking cruise. It's just like, why don't you fucking deal with something that actually fucking matters? Like, yeah, people aren't procreating because A, they can't afford it, and B, they're like, who wants to bring a person into this world? Which I get, but I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna have a kid.
Well, and it's really cool. Hopefully your parents do facilitate that because I agree with you. Like,
I w- I'm bullying them into it.
oh, that's funny. Um,
I'm like, you're bitching about the election. I'm like, yeah, that's where we're at. Like we don't even have real elections anymore, and we probably haven't had them for a long time. But so let's hunker down a little bit and stop fucking. What's really important,
old books and family. Shoot,
right?
I
I
was just
agree. I
uh,
agree, and want to not even to be hyperbolic, but like every time I've moved and like just get rid of all my shit, the one thing I can't part with is my books. I'm like I got to keep my books.
even if it's like hundreds of pounds that I shouldn't be like,
I have
yep,
fucking
yep.
I had chests of books, so heavy, and I
I,
fucking hate. I have a Kindle right now because I'm going to be on a mountain for 2.5 weeks, but I hate Kindles. I like the book.
Same, like the paper and the words, like
Yeah,
there's like layers to the visual. For me, like there's layers to the visual of reading and like circumambulating ideas. So like playing with them in
great
my
word.
head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So another,
Um,
yeah.
sorry, go on. Or
I was gonna say, tell what's your what's your story?
I want to get okay. Oof. I, I want to say one thing real quick. We were talking about
Okay,
individualism is dead. I saw this in a movie, so I don't know how accurate it is to like the Taoist or Zen philosophy, but the movie was Ip Man. It's like kung fu movie, but really cool. Anyways, his wife is talking to the main character's wife is talking to him, and she says this line. It's really beautiful. It's your life belongs to you, and it doesn't. And that's just like the perfect sort of depiction of like Taoism often talks about the paradoxical nature of reality. And so I think for an individual to be self-actualized, they do need to have sovereignty and agency and autonomy. But once they have reached that level of actualization, they need, or part of the process should include, what am I going to be able to bring to my community? Who is the best version of myself that will contribute to my community? And so they go hand in hand to me. And so I think, while yes, I do support anarchism from like a philosophical, moral framework perspective, that doesn't mean it's because I'm selfish and greedy. It means because I believe in property rights, and those property rights begin with the physical person that you are, and then it extends to the efforts that you can create. Um, so me, we have similar stories, backstories, but I guess where we diverge is A, I like the anarchism, and B, I have not yet had an experience telling me to focus on what I can control. Like, so much of my being tells me part of my path is to sort of, specifically, let's use the broad word, but is to fight authoritarians. Like, it's just in my fucking blood. And I know that sounds crazy, but like movies like
no,
Gladiator, Like Gladiator
No,
and
dude, I was
300, they speak to my fucking soul.
no man, that's good. When I was in when I was in New Mexico, I was where was I? Yeah, I was around Taos, New Mexico driving, and I saw the most amount of fucking cops I've ever seen in my fucking life doing speed traps on either side of the road. I saw multiple people pulled over, some people getting tickets. I saw people in the process of getting pulled over. People, I couldn't fucking believe it, and I fucking was like, I fucking hate these cops. I was like, I fucking hate you guys. Like, you guys are preying on your community, and um, and Taos seems like it's one of those places where there's like a lot of probably rich people have like second homes, and then everyone else is just like in the service industry. You know what I mean?
There are
And
famous
I was
people
just
that live
like,
there.
right. So it's just, and then the cops are probably like, so yeah, I've been climbing the tallest elevate, getting to the tallest high point in every single state for the past few months. So I've been all over the country, and it's like I've been in multiple places where it's like the nicest cars in town are the fucking cop cars, and I hate that. Um, and yeah, like I was getting pissed, like seeing these cops in New Mexico just like pulling people over because it was that thing where it's like the speed limit's fucking 60. Oh, now it's 40. You know what I mean? Like it's just fucking lowers for no reason, and then they're just there hiding behind a bush to fucking give you a $200 speeding ticket. And I was just like, I just wanted to hang out the window and begin like flipping them off and be like, "Fuck you!" And I was just like, but you know, um, to what end? But then also, yes, if no one does anything, then obviously it's going to perpetuate. So someone has to do something. But you can also to just go deeper on this issue is like you can just extrapolate that to like to life itself. Life is suffering, as the Buddhist said, and um, and sometimes I really think that life is like a stress test. Is like existence, is human existence, self consciousness is just like it's just like life is just a stress test to see like how you act here will determine if you like get to the next level or not or something. um you know but yeah, I don't like cops.
I love how we're like we're interweaving, deep spiritual sort of
Yes,
topics with like real
it's a
life.
little schizophrenic.
Fuck the police, but let's elevate our consciousness.
I mean, I guess I have met a few nice cops, but for the most part my interaction with cops is like, I can't believe they gave you a gun.
Road pirates.
You know
That's
what I
what
mean?
they are. Road
Bro,
pirates.
they're like, dude, like part of me wants to just like become a cop and literally just let everyone fucking go until I get fired or probably jailed for if you're doing that. Just like be a cop and just like be like the chillest. But obviously, but that's the thing. Then you run into fucking people that obviously are criminals, or bad people. But but that's what I think. What it really boils down to is like, we can talk. One of my issues with these people who are on the internet talking is like they're always like, I can listen to Tucker Carlson, who I've really enjoyed recently, and be like, I agree with everything you guys are talking about. Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith, I agree with everything you guys said, but it's like, where is the solution? We've pointed out, we've successfully, intellectually, articulately defined all of these issues. And then next week, look at me talk about all these other different major issues. Where's the solution? The solution is, what are you going to do about it? What can you do? And for me, it, I I had no idea how I was ever going to, and I never thought I was going to get married or have kids, and I'm not married or planning on doing so. I have a ring on the way, and that's, you know, And that's a big deal for me. And that is a big deal for anyone that has a child. That's the point of life becomes self evident when you have a kid.
I lost your video, but I still have your audio. And it was kind of cool, like the way that you're talking, and it was just a picture, and then like an Alan Watts chill step YouTube video. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Oh no.